In the over 10 months since Charlie Kirk's assassination on September 10th, 2025 at Utah Valley University, the internet has been on fire about all sorts of conspiracy theories surrounding his death. And last week, we learned a lot from a preliminary hearing in the murder trial of Tyler Robinson, the man accused of murdering Charlie Kirk that fateful day in Utah. Tyler Robinson is accused of aggravated murder and 5 other felony charges. The prosecution is seeking the death penalty of Mr. Robinson in this case. And what this preliminary hearing is supposed to set out, according to Utah law, is it's supposed to organize and categorize evidence before they move to an oral argument stage and before they actually get a jury in the room to decide, if Tyler Robinson pleads not guilty, whether or not Tyler Robinson is guilty of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And what we learned last week in that courtroom devastates any sort of conspiracy theory surrounding the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I might say it's understandable that people fall for or get involved in conspiracy theories. For one, it's hard to rationalize on a human level why someone would be driven to do this. Charlie Kirk was devoted to civil discourse, civil society, and civil debate. He was one of the best proponents of solving our problems nonviolently in an age of politics where things are increasingly getting violent. He was the one most willing to talk to the left on the right. And he was murdered. And people are sent reeling by that, wondering how that is. And the answers aren't going to be found in conspiracy theories. Of course, it's natural to distrust the authorities or to distrust your government, especially in the wake of several different crises in public trust. Of course, we all lived through COVID just a few years ago. Of course, we've lived through lie after lie after lie from the government. So I'm all for asking questions. I know people are anti just asking questions now. I don't have much of a profession without asking questions as somebody who is a journalist and a podcaster who interviews people for an hour every week. Just asking questions is kind of my gig. But there becomes a point where you have to ask yourself if you're asking the right questions. And if you're asking questions that are anchored to reality. And what we got from this preliminary hearing was a ton of great information that can help us ask good questions about what happened on September 10th, 2025 at Utah Valley University. We have one of the eyewitnesses of that hearing on the show this week. His name is Ryan Helfenbein. He is a friend of Charlie and Erica's and was in that courtroom seeing all the evidence that was being displayed. Some of that evidence presented in the courtroom has not been made publicly available yet because they are still concerned about picking a jury. Nevertheless, those who were inside that room are now filling in some really important gaps. Gaps that, frankly, I think should have been filled in at the beginning of this whole thing, and it might have saved everybody a lot of grief. The biggest gap, of course, is the video of a man, supposedly Tyler Robinson, on the roof taking the shot at Charlie Kirk. And you have seen this video most likely on Fox News and other cable news channels of this individual, supposedly Tyler Robinson, allegedly Tyler Robinson, getting up on this roof and then getting off of this roof. But they played the middle portion. And apparently what that middle portion shows, according to Ryan Helfenbein and Jack Pasibic and a bunch of other folks inside that courtroom, is Tyler Robinson, a man who is allegedly Tyler Robinson, heading to the edge of that building in a prone position. And we all know what happens next. And so, beyond that, it's not just the video. It's not just, oh, well, maybe it could be somebody else. We have a rifle that was recovered, wrapped in a towel and ditched in the woods. That towel had been tested for DNA. That DNA came up with two people's DNA, or that towel came up with two people's DNA, Lance Twiggs' DNA, and a very likely match to Tyler Robinson. Of course, the defense has contested that evidence, the DNA evidence, in court, and the veracity of that evidence will continue to be challenged throughout the duration of this trial. Not only do we have the rifle with one bullet gone, ditched in the woods, in a towel, with Lance Twiggs and likely Tyler Robinson's DNA on it, we also have the fact that Tyler Robinson, throughout his whole day, traveling around the Utah Valley University campus, right? He goes to the campus at 8 o'clock in the morning, then he leaves, and he comes back, 12:23, Charlie Kirk is murdered, Tyler Robinson ditches. Then he comes back 12:30 in the morning, September 11th, middle of the night, just past midnight, to that wooded area, apparently trying to retrieve this weapon, which we know he was unable to find because of alleged text messages between Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs. And so joining us today to sift through all of this, to explain what the mood was inside of that courtroom, not just for those who love Charlie, but for those who are associated with Tyler Robinson, we have Ryan Helfenbein. Ryan Helfenbein is a good friend of the Kirk family. As I've said before, he and Charlie go back to 2019, and over the last 6 years of Charlie's life, they developed a close relationship, one that saw Charlie mature in a lot of really good and important ways as he really stepped into a leadership role and set an example for the conservative movement and for young men and young women across this country on how to live a meaningful life. And even in death, Charlie continues to be that source of inspiration for millions around the world. So, with that, I bring you Ryan Helfenbein. Before we get into this week's interview on the Signal Sit Down, ring that bell to get notifications on future Signal Sit Down content. Hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you may be joining us. And then while you're at it, please leave us a 5-star review and comment who you'd like to see on a future episode of the Signal Sit Down. Remember, it's your government. It's your country. And together, we're taking it back. Without further ado, here's the interview. Ryan Helfenbein, welcome to the Signal Sit Down.
Hey, Bradley, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you.
Well, and thank you for taking the time. I know it's been an emotional couple of weeks for everybody in the conservative movement, but particularly those closest to Charlie Kirk, the Kirk family, the TPUSA family. You were there in the courtroom last week at this preliminary hearing, and so thank you for taking the time to speak with us about everything that was unveiled there, the case against Tyler Robinson, what evidence we found out, and where this thing is heading from here. So first and foremost, before we jump into the emotion of that day, the courtroom, the video evidence, the DNA, the controversy, tell us a little bit about your relationship with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA.
Yeah. So I met Charlie Kirk in 2019. I've been at Liberty University for 7 years, and you know, at the beginning we were working professionally with one another. You know, he was the co-founder of the Standing for Freedom Center, which I'm the founding executive director of. You know, I met him back then when he was about 24, almost 25 years old, and got to know him. You know, over a period of several years, and you know, Charlie has many friends. You know, he was, you know, a stranger to almost no one. There are probably 1,000 people I could point to that on probably a daily, weekly, monthly basis that he was texting, that he was engaged in conversation, sharing Bible verses with. I was one of those guys. And we stopped working together in 2021 closely, but we remained friends. We were at conferences together. He would appear on our podcast from time to time. And then, of course, you know, every year I was involved in at least one, if not two, Turning Point events. And so I've known him for a long time. Erica Bronsfay, that's Erica Kirk's maiden name. Erica I met in 2019 as well, and she was dating, wasn't yet engaged to Charlie, but got to know her really well, going all the way back then. And so, in a way, a friend of the family, having known them before they got married, and then after they got married, had interactions with them, for the past several years. And I'll add this thing. I was with Charlie on September the 5th. That was the last time I saw him. I was in South Korea. We were both speaking at the same conference together, out there trying to strengthen and encourage conservatives and even Christians. Several pastors at this conference, one of them got arrested. That same week, Charlie told this pastor, take a picture with me right now. And he did. And he said, you tell them, if they arrest you, you tell them you're friends with me and I'm friends with the president. And he was just trying to encourage him because, they're facing an onslaught of persecution, being targeted by, political leaders right now who are in power because of their stance for the truth. And so that was the last time I saw Charlie, on September the 10th, when I was in a group text with many pastors, and Charlie was in that group thread. I think the last thing I saw from him in that group thread was around September the 10th or September the 9th, something like that, September the 8th. But just asking for prayer. Hey, I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be going to these campuses. Hey, pray for me. Pray for my safety. Of course. Somebody had, in that thread, said shot had been fired at Utah Valley. And I immediately had texted Erica Kirk. I said, I don't know what's happened, but sister, I'm praying for you, praying for God's protection over you and over Charlie. Just want you to know that. And her response was, I don't know whether my husband is alive or dead right now. And that was just a haunting thought. And so I've walked through some of this with them. No one can know. It's unimaginable to think what she had experienced, not only that day, but the days after. One of the most powerful things that I'd ever seen demonstrated in any woman was on September the 21st, when she said she forgives the killer of her husband. And that was not a fake thing. And she didn't have to give that. No one was demanding that. Certainly anybody would understand wanting justice, but she's also a woman of faith. And I think that was a powerful testimony. And I think there are people out there that do not have the best interests of everyone at heart. They're malicious. They're in it for themselves, rather narcissistic. And they've been peddling a lot of dangerous and reckless ideas that have no grounding or basis in reality or truth. So we can talk about some of those things, but I was invited by Erica just to come sit with the family, to be a friend, not to be some professional podcaster, a reporter, just a friend. And so I got to be there just to do that in support of her and the family. And so I was there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the preliminary hearings to watch what was happening in the courtroom.
And you said you met Charlie in 2019. I mean, you got to see, I think, Charlie, and this is me knowing him not nearly as well as you, but observing him from afar, having conversations when I'd run into him at different events, stuff like that. Got to thank him for all the work that he did at the RNC 2024. And that was the last conversation that I had with him. That was just to be able to thank him for everything that he was doing and to put the movement on track after the 2020 election loss. It was like, I personally had a good feeling of closure when he did pass away. It was terrible, of course, and tragic, but I thank God every day that I just left it all out on the field and wasn't afraid to tell someone thank you, tell someone that you love them and the work that they're doing while they were still here with us. But those last 6 years of his life, I mean, you really saw a Charlie that evolved.
Yes.
I brought Charlie to UC Berkeley's campus in 2018. That was probably the period of time that we worked closest together when I was over in the Republican Club out there leading that event. And what you got at that event was a very aggressive, on the offense Charlie Kirk. He
Yes.
was around, 23, 24 at the time, maybe 25, 26. But uh, what you saw in his later appearances when he got 29, 30, 31, he was much more patient. He was much more fatherly. He was much more comfortable letting others do the talking for him. Talk to me a little bit about the way in which you saw Charlie mature and Charlie evolve over the course of your relationship, because I think it provides such a great example of young men who need purpose and need direction in this country, because without that purpose, without that direction, that is what leads you to do something like Tyler Robinson is accused of doing.
Right. 100% right. No, you laid out that context well. When I met him in 2019, no, Charlie, of course, is a phenom. I mean, he's an autodidact, self-taught, had kind of trained himself up. He had great mentors. I think of a guy named Bill Montgomery. I know that is somebody that was very instrumental in his life. I was actually with him in 2020 when the day that Bill Montgomery died, and Charlie was so grieved by that. I mean, that was a close mentor, kind of a fatherly figure outside of Rob Kirk. I mean, this was somebody who very early invested in him, believed in him. But Charlie Charlie always had a faith. I mean, since I knew him, a Christian, but at that particular moment, faith was not like the out front public feature. It was not the thing. That's more of a private thing. I have a salvation testimony, when it came to faith in Christ and all of that. But it was mainly like, listen, when it comes to the public square, when it comes to the conservative movement, we really just need to like key on a few basic ideas. He was more kind of libertarian in his orientation, free speech, freedom of conscience. These are important things, those sort of constitutional first freedoms. And of course, religion is among them, but he was more like free market is the greatest thing. The Constitution and America is the greatest country ever. Let's unite around these things. And big government sucks. Like that was the kind of the mantra at that particular moment. But I will tell you, and I think this is a big part of where Erica comes into the picture, because Erica was definitely faith first. Erica was always, less political, but more faith. And she has even said, I mean, they were sitting down together at a YWLS summit some years ago. And she said, I'm a little bit more conservative than my husband. And what she meant by that is on the social side of things, she's always been more about the orientation of how faith kind of informs everyday life and about family and about those things.
Which for say real quick, for married conservative men, that is always how it goes. My wife is way more conservative than me on social issues because, the conservative man, he's self-starter, entrepreneurial, innovative, like he's pursuing. And he's, as long as he gets to pursue some other, he'll give a grace to other people. Women, the wives, the moms, no. This is quality of life issue. They are the ones who are going to make sure that marijuana doesn't get legalized in your state, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And well said, by the way. That's exactly right. So they're going to consider the children. They're going to consider what the impact has on the family structure and all of that. And so to put it like this, and this is not like, I don't want to overstate it or anything, but Charlie was thrust, Erica vector. Right? Charlie was go, go, go. Erica would be the one who is like, in a way, the adding more rudder to which way you go. And I saw that. I see them as perfect complements for one another. Charlie never lacked in courage. Charlie never lacked in confidence. Charlie always had things to say. But what Erica did was enhance. Erica brought out the best in who Charlie was. I could see that. I could see how, as they started a life together, were creating a family together, I could see how Charlie's faith became more of a forefront, not an afterthought, but out there. And then he was connecting the dots more and more to How does faith intersect with politics? How does the conservative, what's the true grounding and nature of conservatism itself? What is that? And what makes one a conservative? And I mean, it goes back to fundamentally, there is no freedom without faith, right? And then I would hear Charlie say this: freedom is not man's idea, it's God's idea. I heard that after they got married. Now I've heard other people say that. Yes. But Charlie didn't start saying that until a little bit later. So I think I saw a development in Charlie, and just observing all of that. Again, always a leader, always courageous, certainly, but just, again, the dial of faith kept turning, and it kept going up and up and up, like until where the volume was very loud. And I think most people would say, hey, it was really obvious. I mean, it's like people who weren't even paying attention to what was going on in politics were really starting to see these videos of Charlie playing where he's like talking, he's quoting Bible passages, and he's doing apologetics on campuses. They're thinking like, wait, I thought Charlie was just a political guy. He sounds like a preacher. He sounds like an evangelist. He sounds like a guy who went to seminary. What is going on here? I never knew that, right? And so people were kind of even sending me stuff and saying, hey, wait, I thought he just was like a Trump guy. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, of course he supports the president, but like this man has conviction. So people were kind of having the light bulb click, like Charlie is more than just some kind of a political activist. He's an advocate for these eternal truths that our faith is grounded in.
And it is, I think, very proper that the refrain you mentioned about freedom is something that you only adopt after marriage. Gosh, isn't that true? And it's,
yeah,
and because duty subsumes or consumes what freedom is. Freedom is actually
right.
your duty to do the truthful and right thing, to do the beautiful thing. License has no error, as they say. Error has no right.
Right.
And that because it has no right because it is not right doesn't mean that we don't allow for some errors in our society. We choose the barometer or the layer of society that corrects those errors, right?
Right.
For the most extreme, heinous crimes, we make sure that our judicial system gets involved and that individual has a fair trial. But for the kid who lies to his mom about taking a cookie out of the jar, we'll leave that to the mom. We don't need to get involved. It's still, just because the legal process doesn't get involved doesn't mean that there isn't a spiritual element that needs to be corrected. And in that case, it's the correction of the parents. And Charlie really did understand this. And it turned a bunch of people who, you mentioned pastors were realizing how deep his spiritual life was. All the people who were politicos who had paid attention to Charlie realized this is not the Charlie that was live and let live going to college campuses in 2017, 2018, 2019. This is a very, very different presentation of conservatism, one that is rooted more in the Christian tradition and the ancient tradition. And he spent years and years and years studying, self-taught, as you mentioned, these texts in these books, which are not easy things to get through, especially if you're running a multi-million-dollar political organization. And it is, to touch on just how big the TPUSA apparatus was, right? He started adopting that refrain about freedom after marriage, the ultimate duty, right? Even though his plate was full of duties already because he was running this giant organization.
Yeah.
So
it's spot on.
So you were invited by Mrs. Erica Kirk to come to that courtroom in Utah. Liberty University is in Virginia. You had to make your way out there. Before we talk about what was presented in that room, set the scene for us. I mean, you get there, from what I've heard, the room is pretty small. There's cameras and security all over the place. I mean, take us to the point where you're sitting in the pew.
So we were walking in, there was a lot of security. This was on, you had to go past security gates. Everybody, there's a lot of things you'd have to leave back at the car or the hotel room, right? In order to get in there. It's a lot like TSA getting on a plane. And we kind of assembled as a friends and family group in another room, and then at the appropriate time, we're kind of summoned into that room and file in. And of course, in this, it is a small room, as you describe. Yes, heightened security on multiple sides, on both sides of the room, armed security. There was county law enforcement there, but multiple in the room and then outside the room as well. As every trial goes, a public hearing, you have the prosecution, you have the defense, you have a victim representative. In this case, it's Mrs. Kirk, and then all of her friends and her family with her. You have the defense team defending the accused, Tyler Robinson. So he is afforded the opportunity to also invite friends and family of himself to come. And so, of course, his parents were there. His brothers were there. There were other family members. I believe an uncle was there. The decorum in that room is very respectful. It's very solemn. It's quiet. You could hear a pin drop in the room. The tiniest crinkle of a wrapper sounds loud, right? When you shuffle in your seat and you hear the creak of the wood in the pew, it's loud. It's a modern room, by the way. It's not like these old courtrooms you see on TV, like Matlock or something. I mean, it's like a very modern courtroom. Mm-hmm. And so, bunch of drywall, right? Things like that, recessed lighting and all that. When the judge comes in, we do all the things and the obligatory readings of different things about how decorum is conducted. Let me just say this. This is the part that's unforgettable. When a testimony is offered, everyone is listening on bated breath. Everybody is waiting to hear what each witness has to say. Everybody's waiting to see displayed on the screen that evidence. Most people do not dare to speak or to whisper to their neighbor, except when only absolutely necessary. And that's because literally whoever's sitting in front of you or behind you can hear everything you're saying. It's one of those things. It's more quiet than a church. Okay. But here's the most haunting thing, Bradley. It's hearing the sobs of a widow. And there's evidence. Truth is being presented. The facts are coming out. But to hear a widow who's sitting to your left, just a few folks down from you, the haunting thing is to hear her cry. And it's because she's having to relive that experience. She's having to see it. She's got to see it. This is part of what it is. She has a constitutional right in the state of Utah as a victim to see that evidence presented in that courtroom. And there was a lot of those arguments were presented by the state because the defense, interestingly enough, and this is really important for any listener to understand, it was not that the prosecution was saying the evidence must not get out. It was the defense team saying, we don't want this evidence to get out there in the public because we don't want to prejudice a potential jury pool. The only reason you'd say that is because the evidence is so overwhelmingly damning. And yes, it's not just these inanimate objects and crime scene photographs of just little things like a screwdriver sitting on the ground or an empty holster. It goes beyond that. There's another dimension where this is the husband you lost. This is the father to your children. His life was violently taken from him. You will not, this time of eternity, this side of eternity, you will not see him again. And so I all of that culminated in that moment, the quiet room, people, in that environment. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear the crinkle of a wrapper. You could hear the sobs of a widow. Mm. And that's what I will never forget.
It's, just such a haunting image. And I can't help but think of Mary at the foot of the cross.
Mm,
and how Christianity has impacted, formed, shaped, helped develop our Western judicial system. It's basically
mhm.
like God will provide you the template of somebody who's going through that. It is a requirement of justice. It is your right and a requirement of justice that you relive that. And that sucks. That's going to be the worst
Yeah,
thing possibly imaginable. But the only way to justice is through, right? The only way to the next life, to eternal life, is through this life, and of course through Jesus Christ, right? That it's
right.
just an amazing modern parallel to what we see repeated through the centuries all the way back to the foot of the cross. Um,
Yes.
I want to start talking about what was presented in this courtroom. We knew a lot of evidence already going in. We had the bullets, we had the text messages, we had the rifle. We saw the video of him getting on the roof and him getting off the roof, and they kept that middle part out, which is a pain for a lot of us who have been dealing with bad, phony conspiracy theories about this killing. Partly because that video, I think, wasn't out in the public square for the last almost a year now. And of course, those most impacted being the Kirk family and Erica and the TPUSA family. Um, but before we get to the specific evidence,
Mm.
what were you expecting to see presented when you went in there? What were you Did you have any expectations about what you would learn that we didn't already know beyond the Bella Chows on the bullets and the text messages and stuff like that?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I'm probably going to give the answer you might not expect. I honestly, I have a day job, and so I'm a friend of the family. I'm somebody who has known Erica and Charlie for such a long time, but I do have a day job, right? And my day job is not. I don't spend a lot of time on social media. I have to have people tell me of the crazy things that are being said on social media. Life is really busy. I have a wife. I have 4 kids. I have a life in Virginia. This matters to me. I dropped everything to go. This matters to me. I'm not a paid contributor of Turning Point. I'm not getting paid for this interview. I'm not getting paid to go out there. This was my own personal trip. I took personal time to do it. I did it on my own dime, but I didn't have expectations. And the reason I didn't have expectations is because I'm literally not attuned to the daily things that are happening, all the nonsense online. So I wasn't automatically thinking, wow, like Egyptian planes and exploding, microphones and all of that nonsense. I only learned about some of that stuff, like while I'm there, because we're having conversations in the room about some of the just the noise and the craziness, the lunatics online. So literally, Bradley, I'm going in with just an open mind. I want to hear all the evidence. I think, just reasonably, that the accused, they have their right man. Just because of all the state and federal agencies that have to sign on to this process, they don't just pick people at random and put them on trial. That's not how any of this works, right? So I'm going in with not a lot of expectation other than I'm going to hear some things. Let me say what I did, kind of to your question, just kind of the big reality of all of this. There are so many layers. There's other cases that you can go look. You could Google this, grok it, if you will, where all that was needed was, maybe one eyewitness testimony, some kind of bloody thumbprint, and tire tracks, and this person gets convicted for murder.
Yeah.
This is not that. This is the kind of case where, and soon enough, we'll probably have evidence of not only what the text messages were, but where the cell phone actually was geographically, according to triangulation and GPS. There's so many elements of this that are multi-layered, that are unmistakably clear. There's an attorney. Her name is Andrea Burkhart. She wrote this the other day, and it was exactly as I had witnessed in the courtroom. You have a testimony that is from Lance Twiggs. You have people saying, well, I don't want to believe his testimony. All right, well, just believe his phone. Okay, because we know when the text messages are sent, we can prove that they were sent at such and such a time. We know what the Discord chat was. We know at what time that happened. We can prove all of that. In his testimony, Lance says, yes, he did it. We can prove it based on the text. So if you don't want to believe him, believe his cell phone. Those things comport with one another. But this is the other thing. In the text message and in the testimony of Lance Twiggs, Tyler is going back to the scene of the crime around midnight, a little bit after. So it would have been September the 11th, right? The day changes over.
September 11th, yeah.
Yeah. And he is looking for where he had placed his gun in the bushes. There is video that shows there's something that happens because they can see in this video that he ran over there. And so it looks like he dropped something there. They go look and search for it. Here's the interesting thing. He says in the text message, also in the testimony of Lance Twiggs, the exact description of what that gun was. It was a Mauser 1938, 88-year-old rifle. It belonged to his grandfather. He, under the auspices of I'm borrowing it for a hunting trip, he took that rifle to Utah Valley University. He describes exactly how he left it, that it was covered in a towel. Forensics show the DNA of both Lance Twiggs and prominently the DNA of Tyler Robinson on that towel. But he described in the text message, he's trying to find it, and in frustration, he can't. Well, guess what? They uncovered it. They found it. They were able to look for it, find it, photograph it, submit it as evidence. It went into the chain of custody and all of that around, I think, 6 o'clock earlier that day. So it had been gone. It had been already removed from that spot 6 hours earlier. That thing was already gone. He realizes at that moment, there's no turning back. They have his rifle, and they are going to catch him because they know they're going to be able to determine who that rifle belonged to. And so that was the moment. And then, of course, his parents being able to identify him in those videos, that was their son. And then Tyler in his own confession, Lance in his own confession, Lance Twiggs saying, yeah, that looks like Tyler. There's so many layers to how all of these things connect. And the interesting thing is the defense couldn't do anything, and they didn't, to object to these things. The only thing they did was to say, Your Honor, we don't want to play certain aspects of this video. Now, this is my summation of what they were saying, but because some people will construe it, Bradley, as a confession. And so they didn't want to show all of that because it was so damning, so obvious, so clear, so incontrovertible that no one in their right mind would begin to doubt it. And they're concerned now about the potential of tainting a jury pool. But there's a lot of people that don't pay attention to this evidence, including the ride or die people that have surrendered their own common sense to charlatans online, and they handed the wheel over not to Jesus but to Candace Owens, right? And so this is just it's insane.
I know that we are concerned about tainting jury pools as conservatives. We are all too familiar with politicized trials where you can't convict a cop assaulter in Washington D.C. You can't convict conservatives in New York get screwed over all the time. Like, we're well acquainted with the system. I understand that. But the idea that this was going to be somehow construed as a confession when the murder was live streamed is just beyond me. And we could have saved such a headache by that video coming out sooner. And so I'm so glad that people were in that room who got to see it are now out there talking about it, because that's so crucial. And as you noted, the defense, they brought up not wanting to show video and contesting the DNA results that the FBI conducted on that towel that had Lance Twiggs' DNA and Tyler Robinson's DNA, or a very likely match to Tyler Robinson's DNA. This is a preliminary hearing. So they're just deciding whether or not this is going to go to a full trial here. It seems like from my non-lawyer, non-expert opinion, the defense is pretty resigned to the fact that this is going to move forward. And their number
Right.
one objective right now is just getting the death penalty off the table. That is
Yep.
what it is. Because right now, he's on for the death penalty. He's been charged with aggravated murder, alongside 5 additional felonies and a misdemeanor for the alleged assassination. So that, at
Yes.
least according to NBC News this morning, those are all the different charges. I think there's another one of the felonies is like endangering a child, but of course, aggravated
Right.
murder being the most important one here. They seem pretty resigned to the fact that this is going to go forward. They're quibbling over the DNA evidence, and the prosecutors just said, yes, once we have the real trial, we are welcome to test the veracity of this DNA evidence. But this is what
Hmm.
we've got so far. Were you
That's right.
surprised? You said there's just so many layers. It's all stacking on top of each other, so many points of connection. Were you surprised at all how thorough, how deep the case was against Robinson in this preliminary hearing? I think that was
Mm.
the takeaways for me, that I knew we had all this evidence. I never bought any sort of conspiracy theory about this assassination attempt. I do think it's weird, given what Lance
Yeah.
Wilkins testified, that Tyler Robinson would decide that Charlie Kirk needed to be the person who pays for these things. And
Mm.
of course,
Mm.
not only weird but tragic, just
Right.
difficult to make sense of. Um,
Yeah.
but I was pretty blown away at how thorough, and this is what the TPUSA team was telling us the entire time. Like, don't worry, this is a very strong case that they've built. Were you surprised
Hmm.
at all?
I was not surprised by the evidence that the prosecution, the state prosecution, was presenting. I was, I guess, more surprised at the lack of evidence on the defense team. They didn't have much, right? Now, of course, it's preliminary. They're trying to demonstrate probable cause. But here's the thing: if any of the conspiracy theories were true, like one of them being obvious thing, Tyler Robinson was never on campus. How many times was that said online? He was never on campus. He'd never been to Utah Valley University,
Mhm.
never been on campus. If that was the case, evidence would have been presented immediately by the defense. Your Honor, we have an alibi. This man is being falsely accused. We want to make a motion right now based on this evidence. That would have happened. If for example there was the state the medical examiner who had looked at Charlie and had pulled, by the way, the shards of the 30 cal bullet from his body, if there had been some kind of an explosion from a microphone, that would have been stated by the medical examiner. It's insane, all the different things that are out there, and yet the defense team didn't proffer any of this. The defense team knows that that's complete nonsense. They would have given it if they had that. So that's I think that would be the surprise for me, is how little they had. And so what they're going to try to do is call into question the statistical things. They're going to try to get into sort of the nuance of how forensics works. But at the end of the day, we have the known whereabouts of Tyler. We have his vehicle. We have his facial, resemblance on film. We have him in the placements of the camera would put him right there on the low-C roof. We have his grandfather's rifle. We have the bullets that were engraved. We have the Dremel tool that was left back of the apartment. Got the DNA on the bullets. We've got the DNA on the Dremel tool, where he was etching the meme, "Hey, fascists, catch this." All of those things are there. We even have the targets that with perforated paper where he would have been practicing with this 1938 Mauser, his grandfather's gun. All of those things, the defense has virtually nothing to offer, at least at this point. So I think that was the surprise, is that they didn't have anything. And if any of the things that had been said by these podcasters and influencers out there that have wanted to Turning Point and torment Erica Kirk, if any of those things were true, the defense would have been able to present that.
So I want to ask you about motive. I think one of the more
Mm.
interesting things about Lance Twiggs' testimony was, yeah, I knew Tyler was basically paraphrasing, of course. I knew Tyler was a left winger. He talked about Trump. He did not like Trump, but he never really talked about Charlie. And he never talked about Charlie in connection to anti LGBT, blah, 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 blah. I thought that was interesting to me because in the text messages, it seems as if Tyler is saying that Twiggs, his lover, has been personally affected or hurt by the things that Charlie Kirk has been spewing, or they have been hurt by this. But it
Hmm.
apparently never came up, according to Lance Twiggs. So, um, talk to me a little bit about what you think about the motive for Tyler Robinson carrying out this heinous act after sitting in that courtroom for a few days.
So I am speculating slightly.
That's
And
permission to.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm giving my opinion again, not an attorney. This is complete opinion and hearsay. But like, here's the deal. When I was there on Wednesday, there was the question regarding the Lance Twig testimony. The defense was trying to throw up all kinds of smoke screens procedurally. They were trying to raise all their objections, standing objections, all of this stuff, not trying to get this out there publicly. They wanted to redact a majority of the testimony. It is said that there is a big portion of the testimony that Lance Twiggs is speaking with by video. It's recorded. Ryan McBride, he's part of the state prosecution, and he at some point they do have a discussion about sexual orientation, gender identity, transgenderism, all of that. And so they're speaking personally about the matter, about himself, and about all of those things. He went by Luna at a certain point in time. He has immunity, a certain level of immunity for this testimony. And so they wanted all of that redacted, so we didn't get to see it. And I think the defense is very keen on motive. They do not want the death penalty. They do not want this to be an elevated thing. There was a letter also that the defense did not want to be submitted by Pastor David Engelhardt. He's an attorney, also happens to be a member of the Turning Point board of directors. He's a longtime friend of Charlie as well. And in that letter, he discusses Charlie's faith and the unmistakable public stand that Charlie has made, not only concerning conservative politics, but just being an advocate as a very public Christian, and that this basically this is religious persecution. I mean, Charlie is an American martyr, and so that letter was something that the defense team was very keen on not wanting to be admitted as evidence, and so the judge did allow it to be admitted. That's very, very important. So those two things, transgenderism and then Charlie's faith, those two things they're very concerned about. And that would go to motive.
Yeah, that I think is the strongest motive, that is an anti-Christian or an anti-Christian teaching on human sexuality motive.
Yes.
And is it satisfactory to me? Like, not completely. Like, it doesn't explain it. Of course it doesn't. It's a crazy, heinous act. And something that, if I'm struggling to comprehend and our audience is struggling to comprehend and you're struggling to comprehend as a friend of Charlie, there's an unsung hero. And I'm willing to use that term in this entire story that doesn't get talked enough about. And it's Tyler Robinson's father, who did probably the hardest thing imaginable, which is turn your son in for this act.
Yes.
And if I'm having difficulty, if our audience is having difficulty, if you're having difficulty, I couldn't imagine what it is like for him and for the Robinson family, who by all accounts seem pretty normal.
Yeah.
That had, of course, had an estranged type of relationship with Tyler Robinson because of the lifestyle that he was pursuing.
Right.
But it wasn't a story of broken homes and abuse and single parents and a rough neighborhood. It was none of that. It was a middle class American life, and his son commits this act, and he has to turn him in. You were right across from the Robinson family during this whole
Yeah.
deal. How were they processing this? You mentioned the sobs of Erica Kirk. I couldn't imagine how emotional it was
Yeah.
for them too.
Very emotional for them. And I don't want to state what's in their heart, but I will just say that this is not a proud moment for them. They're grieving also, and probably wondering, where did it all go wrong for our boy? Of course, every child has a mother and a father. And I don't assign bad motives to these parents. I think they're probably just as shocked as anyone else. They were very respectful in that courtroom, from what I could see. Somebody did tell me that when it was said in the Lance Twiggs interview regarding the grandfather's rifle, that the other son would have been the uncle of Tyler Robinson, the uncle, just started crying. So that reveals to me that these are not soulless, dark, twisted people. These are people who are probably a very normal, loving American family, tried to do their best in raising Tyler properly, and are horrified by what happened. And as to your point, a loving father that turned in his son was actually trying to also protect his son in this way. There is no way that if Tyler did not come in willingly, that if he tried to run and evade, he probably wouldn't be alive today. And so that father, understanding that reality, reached out to a friend, a retired deputy sheriff, to get this done right, so that he could willingly surrender himself and not be violently pursued, potentially out there in the public, maybe potentially even at the risk of being shot down himself, because he wasn't willing to go willingly. So that I think that is also the act of a loving father who didn't want his son to die.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's not just what's just and what's good for Charlie and his family. It's what's just and good for Tyler Robinson as well. And that it takes a father to understand that. Ryan, final question for you. Where do you see this going from here? What should our audience be keeping an eye on as the judge considers and we move closer to a trial and to the year since Charlie Kirk's murder?
So September the 1st, there's another hearing, still in the preliminary state. I believe at that time, if I'm understanding correctly, oral arguments will be presented by both the prosecution and the defense. They're going to be bench briefings that are going to be submitted back and forth between the two until then. And then at that point, like, a ruling is made. This is where the judge has to make the determination with all the preponderance of evidence. Is there probable cause? Has that been fully established? And I believe, of course, yes, of course. And then at that point, it goes to trial. So again, I don't know the timeline of that in terms of beyond that. What I would encourage people, according to your question, what I would encourage people to do is, for those who might still be doubters, I would encourage you. There are places where you can go get the transcripts. You can see the evidence as it's been presented. I would encourage, have a digital fast if that's what's needed. Charlie talked about having Sabbath, having your phone being turned off, that kind of thing for just a day. Maybe do a digital fast. Turn off social media, not Daily Signal, but you know exactly what I mean. Turn off social media
too. I mean, I get to go home on the weekends, right?
Yeah, that's right. But take a break from this stuff. If you find that you just don't understand things, that's probably not a good condition. That means that your mind is so open it can never be closed. I reminded of what G.K. Chesterton said in Orthodoxy. Yeah, it's good to have an open mind, But in so much as that mind could be closed again, closed on what? Truth. But if you don't know what the truth is, the worst, the biggest most dangerous place to be is in a place where so much information is being presented to you, you can't distinguish fact from stranger than fiction. So my encouragement is, examine the evidence for yourself. There's plenty of places where this stuff is all cataloged now. And turn social media off. It is so dangerous for you. Again, I don't go there for my ultimate source of truth. Charlie didn't either, by the way. And I think that's really, really important. Let me have one final note. One of the things, I just wrote this last night. I just want to share this. Charlie is a great man. He is a great man, not was. He is a great man. I believe his faith has been made sight. He's in the presence of the Lord. But he's not great because of something innate within him. He is great because of something that he received. And he received it by faith. And so my challenge to anyone, I know that we talk politics and I know we talk policy. These things are really, really important. But one of the things that Charlie came to believe is greater is he that is in me than he who is of this world. It is the truth that sets us free. It is the truth that we stand for. It is truth also that has a name, and his name is Jesus Christ. And so if you haven't put your faith and trust in him, I would encourage you to do so. That's the most important thing. Charlie said, what do I want to be remembered for the most? I want to be remembered for the courage of my faith. And so my hope, Bradley, you and anyone listening, we would all be remembered for the same. That is what it is to be a human being made in God's image. And Charlie, well done. Thy good and faithful servant. He did it well.
Ugh, I have chills. Amen. And we're seeing the fruits of his labor in life and his continued labor in death with just a re-engagement, a resurgence of religiosity amongst those who were impacted by Charlie's life and his death. So, Ryan Helfenbein, thanks for coming on the Signal Sit Down.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sit Down. If you liked what you heard here today, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever before you go. And we love your feedback. It really does help the show. So please remember to leave us a review and comment who you'd like to see on future episodes of the Signal Sit Down. It's because of your support and your interest and your engagement that allows us to continue this incredibly fun work. And together, we'll continue to expose how Washington really works and affect real change. We'll see you next time on the Signal Sit Down.